Her hands were shaking. Not from fear. Not from exhaustion. From 3 missed calls, 2 emails, and a calendar invite from a venture capital firm in Seoul. All arriving within the same hour, on a Tuesday morning, in a spare room that her husband once called a waste of good space. For months before that Tuesday, he had sat across from her at their own kitchen table, looked her dead in the eye, and laughed. Not a small laugh. The kind that lingers. The kind you replay. Nobody is going to invest in this, Tala. You need to hear that from someone who actually loves you. And today, Seoul was calling. But to understand what that phone call meant, you have to understand everything she had to walk through to get there. Tala Adeyemi grew up watching her mother work. Not in an office. Not behind a desk. On her feet, at weekend markets in Atlanta, setting up a folding table before sunrise, arranging handmade shea products in careful rows, greeting every customer by name before she even knew their name. Her mother didn't have investors. She didn't have a pitch deck. She had her hands, her knowledge, and an understanding of ingredients that had been passed down through generations, long before the beauty industry decided those ingredients were worth packaging. Tala watched all of it, and she never forgot any of it. She was sharp in school, disciplined, earned a business degree, stepped into corporate America, and spent a decade doing exactly what she was told a woman like her needed to do to be taken seriously. And then she met Juno. He was precise, disciplined. His family had built their lives around expectation. The right school, the right trajectory, the right outcome. And Juno carried that architecture without complaint, even when it pressed down hard enough to leave marks he didn't talk about. What surprised Tala was the warmth underneath. He was funny when no one expected it. He showed up. They were different in ways that felt exciting then, complimentary, even. She was expressive. He was measured. She thought in stories, he thought in systems. They got married on a clear Saturday in October. His mother cooked. Her aunties danced. It was full and warm and real. And for a while, it was enough. But Tala had something she hadn't shown anyone yet. A notebook. Dark green cover, filled front to back with formulations, brand concepts, ingredient sourcing notes, and names. Yoruba words she'd looked up, each one carrying a meaning she wanted to build something around. She'd been filling that notebook for 3 years before she married Juno. She kept adding to it after. A natural hair care and skincare line, premium, grounded in West African botanical ingredients, made specifically for women who had spent their whole lives being an afterthought in beauty aisles. Not a hobby, a vision. But Juno was accelerating. Promotions, recognition, a trajectory that was visible and validated. And Tala was still in the notebook phase. She told herself she was still preparing, and most nights she believed it. She kept the notebook in the drawer beside her bed. She never showed it to anyone. Not yet. The notebook came out of the drawer on a Wednesday in March. She converted the spare room, ordered supplies, tested formulations, built a website over 3 nights. She named the brand Ife. Love in Yoruba. A whipped hair butter, a scalp oil, a body cream, shea, black seed, alligator pepper. Ingredients her mother knew by touch. Ingredients the mainstream beauty industry had spent decades mislabeling as exotic. She launched on a Friday. First week, 7 orders. 4 of them were her cousins. She reinvested every dollar. Juno said nothing about the launch. Not that Friday. Not the weekend after. The first comment came 3 weeks in. His parents were visiting, a Sunday dinner, his mother moving through their kitchen with quiet authority, his father reading at the table. Tala mentioned that she'd had her best sales week yet. Juno looked up from his phone with a half smile. Is this still a thing you're doing? Not loud. Almost casual. His mother looked up from the stove. It's good to have a hobby, she said. But maybe something more stable on the side. Tala reached across the table and refilled her own glass. Thank you, she said, to no one in particular, and changed the subject. But the tone didn't shift. It sharpened. A dinner with 2 of Juno's work colleagues. A restaurant, good food, easy conversation. Someone asked what Tala did. Juno answered before she could. She's in between things. She sells little lotions online. Laughter. Light, easy, dismissive laughter. Tala picked up her glass. Took a slow sip. smiled like it didn't reach bone. That night, at home, she sat at her workbench and didn't say a word about it. And neither did he. 8 months in, he pulled up a chair. "I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to be honest with you because no one else will." He pulled up her website on his phone. Scrolled slowly. The design looks homemade. The pricing doesn't make sense for what people think they're getting. And who is actually buying this? Not enough people, Tala. The numbers don't lie. She had the numbers. She knew them better than he did. Growth was slow, yes, but it was real. Every month, a little further than the last. She tried to explain that. He listened the way people listen when they've already decided. "You've been at this for 8 months. What have you actually made?" She told him the figure. He nodded slowly. That was his answer. Then came the blogger, a woman with 40,000 engaged followers, a Black beauty community, deeply loyal, posted an honest, detailed review of Ifea's hair butter. She talked about the ingredients. She talked about what it felt like to find a brand that was actually made for her hair. She told her followers to go find it. Tala's phone lit up. Orders started moving. She ran to find Juno. She held the phone out, showed him the post, showed him the comments. Hundreds of women saying, "Yes, finally, I've been looking for this." He glanced at the screen. 40,000 followers isn't an audience. It's a hobby community. He handed the phone back, returned to his laptop. That night, Tala sat alone in her spare room workspace. The orders were still coming in, a number on a screen that should have felt like proof. She sat there for a long time and didn't feel it that way. She had her hand on the laptop. She thought, close it, shut the website down, put the notebook back in the drawer, and stop pretending this is something it isn't. She thought about Juno's voice on the phone, about his colleagues laughing, about his mother at the stove. She sat with all of it. And then she didn't close the laptop. Not because she was certain, because she wasn't ready to be the one who decided it was over. 12 days after the blogger post, a new order came in. Nothing unusual about it on the surface. A name, a shipping address in Chicago, a standard order. The hair butter, the scalp oil, the body cream. Paid in full. Tala packed it herself, the way she packed every order then. Tissue paper, a handwritten card, a small sample of whatever she was currently testing. She shipped it out on a Thursday. She didn't think about it again. 3 weeks later, an email arrived. Short, no pleasantries, no lengthy introduction. "My name is Renee Caldwell. I received your products last month. Your formulations are exceptional. I'd like to talk, if you're open to it." That was it. No company name in the body. No explanation of who she was or what she wanted. Tala read it twice. Then she moved it to a separate folder and told herself she'd deal with it later. Later became 4 days. She almost didn't reply at all. Something about the brevity of it felt either very serious or like a very polished scam. And at that point in her business, she had learned to be careful about both. But the real reason she waited was simpler and harder to admit. She had been disappointed before by things that looked like doors and turned out to be walls. She needed 4 days to decide she could afford to hope again. But something in the phrasing stayed with her. Exceptional. Not "I loved it." Not "great product." Not the soft, generous language of a satisfied customer. Exceptional. The word a professional uses when they're being precise. She replied on a Sunday evening. 1 sentence. "I'm open to it. When works for you." What Tala did not know, and had no way of knowing, was who Renee Caldwell actually was. Renee had spent 15 years in the infrastructure of the beauty industry. Not in front of a camera, not behind a brand, but inside the machinery that determined which brands survived their first purchase order and which ones didn't. She had a particular eye for formulation. She could tell, from the texture of a product alone, whether the person who made it understood chemistry or had simply followed a popular recipe. Ife was the real thing. She knew it the moment she opened the package. She had been looking for exactly this. And she had found it through a blogger post her colleague had forwarded on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before she placed the order. Meanwhile, Juno had taken a promotion. It was significant. The opportunity that validated everything he had worked toward. It required frequent travel to Seoul, sometimes for 2 and 3 weeks at a stretch. The apartment shifted into a new kind of quiet. Tala was at her work table when he left at 7 in the morning. She was still there, or back there, when he called from Seoul at 10 in the evening his time. 12 hours between them, a phone screen between them, less and less to say. He could see the work table behind her on the video calls. The products lined up, the notes taped to the wall. He never asked about any of it. She never offered. The call with Renee lasted 47 minutes. Tala had prepared for 10. When it ended, she sat in her workspace for a long time without moving. She didn't tell Juno about it that night. Not because she was hiding it, because she was still processing what it meant. The incubator application was due in 11 days. She hadn't decided yet whether she was going to submit it. It happened on a Monday. A supplier error. The wrong preservative concentration in a bulk ingredient delivery she hadn't caught until the batch was already made. 3 weeks of production. Every unit compromised. Unsellable. $3,200. Gone. Not investor money. Not a business loan. Money she had moved quietly, carefully, from her personal savings over 14 months. $10 here, $40 there, without making a point of it to anyone. She stood in the spare room and looked at the products lined up on the shelf and did the math she already knew the answer to. Then she called Juno. He was in Seoul. It was late there. She could hear the exhaustion in his voice before she finished the first sentence. She told him what happened. Straight. No drama. Just the facts. He was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed. Tala, this is exactly what I was worried about. You're not a business person. You're a creative. Those are different things. A business person has quality controls. A business person doesn't lose $3,200 to a supplier mistake. She didn't say anything. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because someone has to. She told him she had to go. She hung up. And then, only then, she sat down on the floor of that spare room, surrounded by compromised products and 4 months of wasted margin, and she cried. She didn't call Juno back. She called her mother. She didn't give her the full breakdown. She just said it was hard, that she'd taken a loss, that she wasn't sure the timing was right for any of this. Her mother listened, and when Tala finished, she said only this. Your grandmother sold in that market through a drought and through a war. She didn't have a website. She didn't have a spare room. She had a table and what she knew. Finish what you started. She reached out to Renee the next morning. They met in person for the first time. A coffee shop in Atlanta. 2 hours. No agenda written down, but both of them knowing exactly what the meeting was for. Renee didn't offer money. She offered something that, at that stage, was worth considerably more. She told Tala about a beauty incubator program. Small, selective, not widely advertised. 12 brands per cohort. Founders who were accepted came out the other side with a standardized production process, a retail-ready brand deck, and direct introductions to buyers and investors who were actively looking for what they were building. The application was detailed. The acceptance rate was low. Tala applied anyway. She got in. She had handed in her notice at the corporate job 3 weeks into the incubator program. Not dramatically. She had simply looked at her calendar one morning and understood that she could not do both things at the level either of them deserved. What followed was 6 months of the most concentrated work of her EFA. She rewrote the brand deck from the ground up. She worked with a cosmetic chemist to standardize the formulations. Reproducible at scale without losing what had made Renee stop and pay attention. The supplier vulnerability that had cost her $3,200 was the first thing they fixed. She worked early in the morning and late at night. She ate at her work table. She kept a running list of questions on her phone and sent them to her mentor at odd hours, not caring anymore what time it was or what that said about her. Juno was in Seoul for most of it. When he was home, they moved around each other carefully, polite, functional, the rhythms of a shared ife without much shared conversation. He saw the work. He didn't ask about it. She didn't bring it up. The apartment had the particular quiet of 2 people who have stopped explaining themselves to each other. She told herself she wasn't doing it to prove him wrong. She repeated that often enough that some nights, she almost believed it. The showcase was held on a Thursday afternoon in a rented event space in Atlanta. Clean lines. Good lighting. 12 tables, 1 per brand, each founder standing behind their work. Products displayed, brand decks printed, ready to be seen by people who could change everything with a single decision. Tala had rehearsed her pitch until the words stopped feeling like words and started feeling like breathing. But when the moment came, when the first group of buyers stopped at her table and picked up the hair butter and turned it over to read the back, she didn't give them the rehearsed version. She told them the truth. Her voice was steady. She noticed that and was surprised by it. Not the steadiness itself, but where it came from. Not from the rehearsal. From something older than the rehearsal. She was standing in front of people who could change everything, and what she felt was not fear. It was the calm of finally being exactly where you are supposed to be. She talked about her mother's table at the Atlanta market. She talked about the ingredients, what they were, where they came from, what they had been used for long before any beauty conglomerate discovered them. She talked about the women who had been writing to her since the brand launched, telling her that they had spent 20 years and thousands of dollars on products that were never actually made for them. The room shifted. Not dramatically. Not all at once. She could feel it. The way people slowed when they reached her table, the way they picked up the product more than once. They asked follow-up questions. They exchanged glances with each other. The glance that passes between professionals when they're looking at something they recognize as real. 2 buyers from a major clean beauty retail chain asked for her card before they moved to the next table. Then a man in a dark suit, part of a Korean-based investment group that had been quietly expanding their portfolio into global wellness, stopped. He asked 3 precise questions about her sourcing, her production capacity, and her margin structure. She answered all 3 without hesitation. He asked for a formal follow-up meeting. She said yes, kept her voice level, waited until he walked away before she exhaled. The incubator had already circulated her brand to a network of buyers and investors before the showcase. Within 2 weeks, 4 investor inquiries had come in through the incubator's contact channel. A pilot retail placement offer arrived by email on a Wednesday morning. Regional rollout, small but legitimate, the kind of foothold that brands spent years trying to get. A beauty editor at a publication Tala had read since college sent a direct message asking if Faye would be available for an upcoming feature on founder-led ingredient brands. Her phone stopped being a personal device and became something else entirely. She moved through those 2 weeks in a state she didn't have a clean word for. Not quite euphoria, not quite disbelief. Something more like clarity. Juno came home on a Friday. He noticed immediately. Not because Tala said anything, she didn't, but because the apartment had a different frequency to it. Her laptop was open. Her phone was face up on the table. Notifications were arriving in clusters. He sat down across from her while she worked. He watched for a moment. Then he picked up one of the Faye products sitting on the kitchen counter. The body cream, the one she had reformulated during the incubator program. He turned it over. Read the back. Not a glance this time. He read it. The full ingredient list. The sourcing note she'd added in small text at the bottom. The Yoruba word printed beneath the brand name, with its translation beside it. Love. He set it down carefully. How long has this been happening? He asked. Tala didn't look up from her screen. A while, she said. The laptop screen reflected in her eyes. And Juno sat there in the quiet of the apartment that had been mostly his alone for 6 months. Surrounded by evidence of everything he had dismissed, everything he had laughed at, everything he had measured against the wrong scale, and said nothing. There was no confrontation, no moment where the credits rolled and the wrong was declared loudly in front of witnesses. That's not how this kind of damage works, and it's not how this kind of repair works either. What happened was quieter than that, and because of that, it was harder. It was a Sunday evening, about a week after Juno came home. He waited until she closed the laptop. Then he asked if he could see it, all of it. The pitch deck, the financials, the investor correspondence, the retail offer, the feature request. She looked at him for a moment. Then she opened the laptop back up and turned it toward him. He went through it slowly. He didn't skim. He read the brand deck from the first page to the last. He looked at the revenue trajectory. He read the email from the investment group in Seoul, the same city he'd been traveling to for months, the same industry networks he moved through, asking for a formal meeting with his WFA's company. He closed the laptop. "I didn't think it could be this," he said. "I know," she said. That was the problem. The real conversation took 3 hours. Not 3 hours of argument, 3 hours of honesty, which is considerably more exhausting. Tala told him what it had cost her. Not the $3,000. The other cost. The one that doesn't appear in a financial statement. She told him what it felt like to bring him something she had carried for years. Something built from her mother's knowledge and her grandmother's resilience and her own decade of feeling invisible in rooms that took her work and didn't say her name, and have him respond with a laugh and a label. Little lotions. She told him that dismissal dressed up as concern was still dismissal. That she had spent their marriage making herself smaller in proportion to how large his certainty had become. That the spare room, the one he called a waste of good space, had been the only place in their home where she was fully herself. He listened. He didn't defend himself. That was the first thing he got right. He told her his own truth. That he had confused financial caution with emotional support. That the way he had been raised, protecting someone meant steering them away from risk. That he had watched her build something he didn't understand and responded with the only tool he had, which was skepticism. That he understood now that it had landed as contempt. That he was sorry. Not a short sorry. A real one. It didn't fix anything that night, but it opened the door to something that might. They started counseling the following month. A Thursday evening, every week, a therapist's office with 2 chairs and a lot of silence that slowly, over time, became words. It was not comfortable. It was not quick. Some weeks Tala drove home from those sessions feeling further away from resolution than when she'd walked in. Some weeks Juno sat in the car afterward for 10 minutes before he could move. But they kept going. Meanwhile, Ife did not wait for the marriage to heal before it kept moving. The retail deal closed. A regional placement in 42 stores, clean beauty section, premium shelf position. Tala negotiated the terms herself. She hired 2 people. Her first employees. She sat across from them at a table in her leased studio and explained the brand and what it stood for and what she expected. She heard herself and recognized something in her own voice that hadn't been there before. She flew to a beauty trade show in New York. Her brand on a banner behind her. Her name on the badge in front of her. People stopping at her booth who had found Ife online and wanted to tell her what it had meant to them. She stood in that booth for 2 days and never once felt like she needed someone else's permission to be there. The press feature ran on a Tuesday. A full profile, her photo, the brand story, the ingredient sourcing, the incubator journey. It was shared widely. It reached people she had never marketed to. It reached Juno's family. His mother saw it. She read it. And that evening, she sent Tala a message. 4 words. "We are proud of you." From the same woman who had stood in Tala's kitchen and called it a hobby. From the same table where Juno had used the word lotions to make his colleagues laugh. Tala read the message twice. She saved it. She didn't respond right away. Not out of cruelty. Not out of strategy. She just needed to sit with it. With the distance between that dinner table and this moment, and everything she had carried in between. But the most important moment of all, it didn't happen at a trade show. It didn't happen when the investors called. It happened at home. The spare room was gone. Not demolished, repurposed. A guest room again, plain and quiet. The work table moved out, the product shelves dismantled. What had happened in that room had outgrown it. Tala had signed the studio lease on a Thursday morning, alone, with a pen she still keeps in her desk drawer. Juno came on a Saturday. She hadn't asked him to. He had asked if he could. She said yes. He arrived before the workday started, when the studio was quiet and fully itself. She unlocked the door and let him walk in ahead of her. He stopped just inside the entrance. The shelves first, the original products and the new formulations, organized and labeled, a product line that had not existed 2 years ago. Then the work table along the back wall, the chemist's equipment, the vision board near the door, photographs, swatches, words, ingredient names in her own handwriting, and more than half of it already crossed off and replaced with something larger. Then the framed photograph beside the window. Her grandmother at a market table, early morning, the light catching the side of her face, looking at something outside the frame that the camera couldn't see. The notebook was on the work table. Dark green cover, worn at the corners now. Still open. Juno stood there for a long time without speaking. Then he turned to her. "I'm sorry I couldn't see it," he said. Tala looked at him. "You see it now," she said. "That matters too." She built it because the idea was true. And true things, tended carefully, have a way of surviving. Ife. Love in Yoruba. She chose that name before the first order. Before the blogger post. Before Renee's email. Before the showcase, the investors, the retail shelves, the trade show badge with her name on it. She chose it when the brand was still a notebook in a drawer beside her bed. She named it Love before she knew how much it would cost her. Before she knew how many nights she would sit alone in that spare room. The house quiet, the screen bright, deciding again and again to stay. Before she knew what was waiting on the other side of all that deciding. She built it anyway. If this story moved you, share it with someone who is building something quietly right now. Someone who hasn't shown anyone the notebook yet. Someone who needs to hear that the room they're working in is not too small for what they're carrying. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe. Because next week, we have something you are not going to be ready for.